On today's show, Chris Bosh's name is getting tossed around as a new comp for Evan Mobley. We're going to talk about it on this edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, and of course, my new Substack, The Inside Shot. You can find that link below in the description if you would like to subscribe. Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. I appreciate every one of you that does make Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review as well. Let's grow this show. Basketball season is back. I think I'm giving you guys some really good Cavs content. I want you to give your friends some really good Cavs content as well, too. So let's grow this show. Also, check us out on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs on YouTube. If you're watching this video right now, hit that thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, and click the notification bell so you get the latest Locked On Cavs content coming your way as soon as it is up. Of course, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, of course, is brought to you by FanDuel, and you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you will get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, lately with the Cavs, and the Cavs did have practice on Sunday as I record this late Sunday night. They had practice on Sunday, but we're off Friday and Saturday. But one of the things that's been happening lately with the Cavs is Evan Mobley he's been getting comparisons, been drawing comparisons to Chris Bosh. And I think that's a really interesting thing because we all know Chris Bosh as the guy in Miami who played, third fiddle behind LeBron, behind Dwayne Wade, was a Hall of Famer, won a couple of championships, was a really, really good player, a multi-time All-Star. But I think when we think of Chris Bosh, we think of the guy that had to take a step back in order to make things happen, to make it work in Miami alongside LeBron and Wade. So I want to start by saying I don't think that comparison is a fair one because I don't think Evan is in a position right now where he needs to take a step back. The comparison I do find more interesting is comparing Evan to the Toronto Raptors version of Chris Bosh. We don't think about that a ton because it's been so long. Like he left Toronto the same year LeBron left Cleveland the first time to go to Miami. So this was the summer of 2010. It's been a really, really long time since anyone really outside of Toronto has thought of Chris Bosh in a Raptors uniform, right? But that guy was awesome. And I think that is a very fair and fine comparison to make to Evan Mobley to an extent. I don't think it's the whole thing. I think that there are some similarities. I think that there are some differences. Just looking back at what Chris Bosh did during those years, where he, I think, developed a little bit quicker than Evan offensively, where in his third year, he was an all-star because he was a scoring machine, because he was somebody that was really helping to lift up the Raptors on that end of the floor. And conversely, Chris Bosh never got as good in his entire career defensively as Evan Mobley already is. So I think that right there, those are two things that you can pick out and say, okay, well, Bosh was, I think, more ready on the offensive end earlier in his career than Evan was, but on the other end of the floor, Evan was just so much better, so far and away a different type of player than Chris Bosh ever was throughout his entire career. So I think those are good places to start. And I do think that this is a fair comparison, but they are two different players. And I think that they have some different skill sets. And diving into the differences is a fun activity. So going back, and if you want to take out Chris Bosh's first 2 years where he was obviously still growing, still learning, he didn't necessarily get a ton of usage offensively. I think his rookie year, he averaged 11 points a game. So it's not as if he was somebody that everything was going through. And also he was still growing and still getting better on the offensive end of the floor. So in his final 4 seasons in Toronto, and I think that this is a good goal for Evan Mobley to shoot for. Chris Bosh's last 4 seasons with the Raptors, he averaged 23 points and 10 rebounds and right around 2 assists per game. If you put that into today's numbers, that's a little bit closer to like 25 points and 11 rebounds, just considering the pace that the NBA has played with, just some things that have changed. The scoring explosion that we've seen since like 2007 when these numbers were really taking place for Chris Bosh. So that is something to bring into consideration here. Can Evan Mobley do that? Because that's really what this all comes down to. Can he be that guy? Now, he's not going to be the team leader in usage the way that Bosh was with the Raptors. Like, that's just not going to be his role as long as Donovan Mitchell's here. And that's okay. Because I actually think if you could have taken that version of Chris Bosh and made him the number 2 on a team rather than the number 3 on a team like he went in Miami, things would have worked out pretty well. I think that team would have been really good. So I do think that having Evan Mobley be the number 2 in Cleveland can look a lot like what Chris Bosh looked like as the number 1 in Toronto. It's an interesting thing to think about. Now, they're not the same player. And a couple of people have been asked about this. Kenny Atkinson was asked about this on Sunday, and he thought it was a good comparison for Mobley, but he says that they're different players. It's a fair observation to make. But the one thing that he brought up immediately was, the better Evan shoots it from the outside is going to be more beneficial. One, because today's NBA is so much different as far as spacing goes than the NBA was 15 years ago when we're talking about Bosh. So that is a big difference there too. But also, Chris Bosh, he didn't shoot a ton of three-pointers. Like in that time in Toronto, he shot 29% on less than 1 three-pointer per game. Now, Evan Mobley, obviously, to date, has not been a high-volume three-point shooter by any stretch of the imagination. He's not taken more than like 1.3 a game ever during his career so far. So that is something to think about. But I do think that's something that could change with his role this year. Because another thing that Kenny said on Sunday after practice, he said that they expect Evan to be around between 3 and 4 per game. So Evan's played 1 preseason game so far with the Cavs this year, and he took 2 3-pointers, and I think he played like 18 minutes and 50 seconds. So let's just round up, call it 19 minutes. He took 2 3-pointers. That translates to like 3.5 per 36 minutes, maybe like 3.7 per 36 minutes. I haven't done the exact math on that, but that's about where it is. So that is between 3 and 4 per game, essentially, because I don't think Evan Mobley is going to be averaging more than 36 minutes per game under Kenny Atkinson. I think even 36 is probably a little high. I would expect him to be around 32. So that shooting is something that can differentiate Evan Mobley from what Chris Bosh was when he was in Toronto. Now, when Bosh got to Miami, he certainly shot a little bit more from the outside, still not a ton, was, in those days, a medium volume 3-point shooter shooting around 3 a game. And then once LeBron came back to Cleveland, that upticked a little bit more because he was a higher usage guy, because he moved from being the number 3 option to the number 2 option for a little bit before, unfortunately, as we know, his career was cut short. The other thing that I think we can see from Evan that's different than what we saw from Bosh in his career is the playmaking. I think that Evan is probably a more gifted passer than Chris Bosh was, and I think that he's going to be put in positions that are different than what Bosh was put into to make plays. I think Evan has shown that he's a really good passer. I have been impressed with his passing ability so far during his career. Now, he's averaged 2.8 assists. So I'm not talking like he's, Nikola Jokic out there as a playmaking big man quite yet. But would it surprise anybody if Evan Mobley at some point in the next 3 years averaged 5 assists a game? I don't think so. I don't think that would be some crazy thing to see, especially if the ball is in his hands more frequently. But can he get up to that 23 points a game? I don't know. That might be a little bit high. I think if he's around 20 points a game, yeah, I think this is a pretty fair comparison to make. I think it's it's something that I very easily could see being talked about more widespread in the next several months. If Evan Mobley has the year that we expect Evan Mobley to have, if he has the aggressiveness that he showed in that first preseason game, if that's what he plays with when the regular season arrives, then I think this kind of conversation, because I do remember Chris as being an aggressive player in Toronto when he didn't have to take a back seat to 2 other All-NBA players. Now, we'll see exactly what it looks like for Evan. I don't know. But I do think that offensively speaking, because I don't think defensively Chris Bosh is ever in the conversation of what Evan Mobley is. So offensively speaking, I think being Chris Bosh in Toronto is a really, really, really good goal, because that is somebody who he received MVP votes. And, he never won it. He never got close to one. I think the highest he finished was 7th. But the fact that you are receiving MVP votes means you're really, really good. So I do think that this is a good aiming point for Evan Mobley. I think it's a fun comparison. I don't think it's an entirely accurate comparison, but I think it's a comparison that is worth thinking about at least a little bit, because Evan can do some of those things, but he's going to be able to do some other things differently than Bosh could. And I think those things can be some of the most beneficial to the Cleveland Cavaliers this year and in years to come. Up next, I've got injury updates. The Cavs had a scrimmage. And one thing from Kenny Atkinson that he said that I took as very interesting from his Sunday media availability. We'll talk about all that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel Sportsbook is, of course, America's #1 sportsbook. And you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, because right now you can get started with a $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. I hope that if you did bet this weekend on maybe some NFL action, you took the Cleveland Browns plus 9.5. Now, the Browns are a dumpster fire, but 9.5 was a lot of points. I probably would have been the other side. I wanted to stay away from that because right now, let's be real, I don't trust the Browns. There's no reason to trust the Browns. There's no reason to subject yourself to that. If you are looking for something that I might think is wise, well, I'm going to head on over. I'm going to pull up FanDuel app. Going to head on over to the win totals in the NBA. Just click on regular season wins. Scroll down to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Right now, the Cleveland Cavaliers win line is set at 48.5 wins. It's a little bit juiced for the under. I like the over. I like what I've seen from the Cavs so far. I think the Cavs are incredibly talented. I'm not sure how much would have to go wrong for this team to not eclipse the 50 win mark again this year. I think that this is going to be a team that wins 52, 53, maybe 54 games. Well, you can do math. 54, 52, 53, all those numbers I just listed off, they're all greater than 48.5. I think the Cavs are more than capable of that. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably think that too. So head on over to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you place $5 on that bet or any other bet, you will get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So head on over to FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Sorry if my voice sounds a little bit hoarse today. I went to the Cleveland Guardians game on Saturday, game 5. I am a giant Guardians fan. I live and die with playoff baseball, and I haven't really been able to talk since Lane Thomas hit that grand slam in the bottom of the 5th inning on Saturday in game 5. So if you're listening to this Monday, that means game 1 of the ALCS between the Guardians and the Yankees is coming up tonight. So once you're done making Locked On Cavs your first listen today, go check out Locked On Guardians. Justin and Jeff have you covered with everything you need. Go make Locked On Guardians your second listen today, because you want to get ready for the basketball season. You want to get ready for the Cavs season. But if you are a Clevelander like I am, you're going to want to get ready for the American League Championship Series. And there's no better place to do that than Locked On Guardians. So the Cavs had an inter-squad scrimmage on Sunday. I was not at practice Sunday. I had some family stuff going on, so I couldn't make it over to Cleveland Clinic Courts for the availability today, but I did, read quotes, listened back to all the sounds that from Kenny Atkinson and George Yang spoke to. So they had an inter-squad scrimmage, and there were a couple of things that I took away from Kenny Atkinson's media availability that I thought were interesting. One, he was asked about the condition of Max Strus. If you remember, he left that first preseason game with a right hip contusion. He did not take part in the scrimmage. Atkinson said that he kind of remains day-to-day. I don't know if this is a significant thing. I still don't have reason to believe it is, but the Cavs open up the regular season now in a week and 2 days. So it is something that is at the very least worth monitoring. Sam Merrill also did not take place in the inter-squad scrimmage on Sunday. Atkinson said he's day-to-day. He's dealing with a wrist issue. I'm not sure when that happened, where that came from. I do believe he had his wrist taped during that first preseason game he played in, so I don't know when that happened. But neither of these injuries seem like they are very concerning. Atkinson mentioned that the team is being extra cautious with both of them. So I would guess, my guess is that they're both back when the regular season begins. My guess is probably that they don't play in the first of 2 more preseason games this week on the road that the Cavs have on Wednesday when they are in Detroit. My guess is they don't play in that game. But maybe they're able to play Friday night when the team is in Chicago. So that is something to keep watching for. So one of the things that Kenny Atkinson said during his media availability is he was talking about George Niang as a connector and just all of the things that, even if George isn't a big box score guy, all of the things that George can do that really help out the offense flow, the defense stay together, just little things like that. And one of the things that he said was, he was talking about George on offense, and he goes, well, he was in the 84th percentile for screen assists last year. And, then he made mention that he had a bit of a down year shooting, which he did. But the screen assist thing was something that stuck out to me because I do think it's been very clear from the really the media day availability that Kenny Atkinson and Kobe Altman had a couple of Fridays ago. From then, I think it's been very clear that this organization is moving into being more analytical than it was when JB Bickerstaff was the head coach. Not that that's good, not that that's bad. I personally think it's good, but I understand not loving that stuff. But the screen assist, especially being able to rattle off right away that he was the 84th percentile in screen assist last year. That tells me like that is a metric that the Cavs do care about, that Kenny Atkinson does care about right now. And I think it's interesting to learn exactly what the new coaching staff cares about, what they are looking for, because while they're learning about this roster, we are kind of learning about them, right? As we get more and more data in terms of preseason game, media availabilities, when the regular season gets here, as we get more and more of that, we're going to learn more and more, not only about what they're doing, but kind of the way that they think, because I think that's sort of just as interesting as what they're doing on the floor, is the way that they're thinking and what their process is. I think we're learning a little bit when Kenny mentioned something like screen assists. It's interesting to see how these metrics are used, because a guy who on the Cavs was really good, scored really well there, Jared Allen. He's a great screen setter, has really good screen assist numbers. Evan Mobley, maybe not quite as much. I think that leans into, that can sort of start to paint a very broad, a really fuzzy picture about how those guys will be used and how Evan's going to be put in different positions than Jarrett will be, because Jarrett is good at this one thing that Kenny specifically mentioned, and Evan might not be quite as good at that. That's not necessarily the strongest part of his game on offense. So I thought that was an interesting thing to take away from. The other thing from the last week or so, and this wasn't a Sunday thing, but the other thing from the last week or so that I have found fascinating is the conversation around Ty Jerome, where, Kobe Altman mentioned at Media Day that Ty Jerome has been the MVP of September, which of course means absolutely nothing. The MVP is voted on in April, and that's what matters, and Ty Jerome will not be that, which is fine. He's not supposed to be. He's not expected to be. He's a role player. That's great. But I do think as we start to sketch out what this rotation looks like, as we have a couple of Ty Jerome preseason games now, especially one where I think he got a little bit of extended run against the Pacers in that second one, I think we're starting to see that he's going to be a significant part of this team. The Cavs are going to have expectations for him to be that third point guard. And I think that there can be some really effective pairings that involve him. And the thing that I think is most important here, and that the Cavs did not have last year that really hurt them, and this is not a slight at someone like Craig Porter Jr., who I'm really high on, but once Ricky Rubio announced last year that he was stepping away and not returning to the NBA, it became really, really difficult. And I think it was difficult for JB Bickerstaff beforehand. It became really, really difficult for JB Bickerstaff to have both Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland off the floor. I think that Ty Jerome, oddly enough, and I'm going to connect these dots here, I think Ty Jerome can be a big help in Evan Mobley's development, because I think that the competency he has at that position, playing point guard, and the fact that he's a little bit of a bigger point guard too, standing at like 6'4", 6'5", I think that he can play a few minutes alone on the court in terms of no Darius Garland, no Donovan Mitchell, and Evan Mobley can be on the floor with him. And some of that offense, Ty can run some of that, but more of it can run through Evan. Like that can be a particular pocket in the game where Evan Mobley can be the one that's sort of leading the charge, if you will, where he can really take a stranglehold and he can be the focal point. He can be the offensive fulcrum. I think that is a really bright, a really good thing, a really potentially good thing for the Cavs in terms of just looking at Evan Mobley's development. I think Ty Jerome's shown enough in these preseason games. Obviously, we've heard a lot of really good stuff about Ty from behind closed doors settings about how good he's been, that people have talked about him. Like I've not heard a bad word about how he's practiced yet. So that is something that I think he's going to be part of this rotation. I think he's going to be playing, I'm hesitant to say significant minutes, but 15 minutes a night, I think that's probably a pretty good spot for him. And I think some of those 15 minutes can be paired with Evan Mobley, and that can pay, I think, pretty big dividends in the long run when you're talking about this Cavs team. So the Cavs have 2 more preseason games this week. They're in Detroit against old friend JB Bickerstaff, and they take on the Chicago Bulls on Friday. What do we expect to see from those? That's straight ahead right here on Locked On Cavs. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review as well. Also, if you're watching this show on YouTube right now, hit that thumbs up button for me. Click the subscribe button and hit the notification bell if you like what you're hearing, because there's going to be so much more content coming from Locked On Cavs. The basketball season is here. I want you to have great Cavs content. I want you to tell your friends about Locked On Cavs. Let's grow this channel. Let's give everybody the best content from the Cleveland Cavaliers that we possibly can, because the basketball season is here. So excited to talk about it with you guys every single day. So we're down to 2 preseason games. We've got 2 more preseason games coming this week. They're in Detroit on Wednesday. They're in Chicago on Friday. What are we looking for? Thing number 1 I'm interested in, the starters have to play again. I don't know if they're going to play in both games, but they have to play in one of these games. Is it going to be Wednesday? Is it going to be Friday? I think it makes sense, personally, to play them in both games at least a little bit. Maybe not a ton. I will say that, okay, so I think in Wednesday's game, the starters should probably play like 25-ish minutes, maybe even a little bit more. If you think back to the past couple of years, when the starters have been healthy, JB Bickerstaff had a game where he would play them significant minutes. Like I remember one game, I think this was 2 years ago, where the 5 starters like all played the first 11 minutes of the first 3 quarters. And it was weird and it was a little strange, but it was sort of the coaching staff's way of getting them ready to play significant minutes when the regular season arrives. I think starters are going to play fewer minutes under Kenny Atkinson, partially because I think the depth is just better on this team too. But I think that's going to be, how much are they playing is something that is interesting to watch for. Like that is something I'm very curious to see, because they do need to be ready to play 30 plus minutes when opening night arrives. Not saying that they're all going to play 36 minutes when opening night gets here, but I would expect all of them play between 29 and 33 minutes. I think that's probably a pretty safe spot to be for everyone in that starting group. And then the other thing I'm interested in is if there's a game like that, everybody can't play. If there's a game where starters are playing 25, 27 minutes, not everybody can play. So what does that rotation look like? What does the top 12 look like with 1 week left until the regular season? I think we're going to start to get some rotational answers this week, and I'm fascinated by it, because I think Kenny Atkinson has a tough job cutting this roster down from, there are 14 guys on standard NBA contracts. Kenny has said he'd like to play 10, 11 at the max. So that means he has to cut at least 3 or 4 guys. I don't know who it's going to be. I'm fascinated to find out. And I think this week is going to start to give us more and more hints as time goes on. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button right now. Click the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you know when the latest Locked On Cavs content is coming your way. I will be back with a full week of episodes. Like I said, we've got 2 preseason games, Wednesday and Friday, and then the regular season is here. Next week, we will be talking about the 2024-2025 regular season for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I can't wait. I hope you're in the same boat as me. I am so excited to keep covering this team on an everyday basis right here on Locked On Cavs. So like I said, thank you for making us your first listen every day. Rate us, review us anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else, on YouTube as well. And I will be back tomorrow with more Locked On Cavs.